readers,
reviewers,
countrymen,
lend us your ears. Welcome back to the channel. I am Brother Will, this is Brother Ed. We are brothers on the Brothers Gwynne. Today we're going to be talking about...
brothers.
Brothers, yeah, you sound a bit like Brad Pitt in Troy then.
I love sounding like
that's my compliment to you for the day.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Oh, of course.
Especially when he's in Snatched. I have to be charged to be... what did you do? A caravan from her.
Oh, I learned everything about what he did in that film after I watched it. That he was actually going to leave, but then Guy Ritchie said, you just need to change your accent so nobody understands you, because Brad Pitt was like, I can't do an Irish accent. And then Brad Pitt was like, oh yeah, cool. But today we're going to be talking about some of our new favourites from the months that we were not on the channel. There's quite a lot of books that we really loved and we want to talk about them. And so should we just get it underway?
Yeah, well, we have chosen 4 books each, but classic me, I cheated a bit. And I chose kind of the Chronicles, the Saga of Conan. So I'll
give that one to
you. Thank you. So I read all of these over the last few months, and I absolutely loved them. I don't know what got me hooked on. I think I saw the trailer for The Northman in about late December, and there were so many nods to Conan. I was like, well, I've got to watch Conan again. So I watched Conan again, and then I was like, now I've got to read Robert E. Howard, because I've never read Conan before.
And you took the assignment pretty seriously, didn't you?
Yeah. I bought a lot of Conan books.
You've read every single
I
story about Robert E.
discovered
Howard, haven't you?
Frank Frazetta, which was a big thing. It's a big kind of rite of passage for me now that I have Frank Frazetta paintings on my wall, which is pretty cool. But anyway, Robert E. Howard's Conan the Cimmerian is an absolute masterpiece of fantasy. Conan takes himself a little bit seriously, but I absolutely just love the world that he's created. Robert E. Howard is a fantastic writer. There is no arguments there. He paints such a vivid picture that is dark and grim and utterly satisfying to read. The character of Conan is... I mean, he's a bit of a brute sometimes. I mean, he's obviously, this is classic fantasy. I know that Tolkien said once or twice that he was a big fan of Robert E. Howard, which is cool. But he's a very different storyteller to Tolkien in the fact that Conan is... I mean, it's a little bit misogynistic, but you can feel that how it is dated, how it is written in a different time. But I think the prose doesn't feel as if it was written, you know, over 100 years ago. It feels fresh and you know, a little bit archaic at sometimes, but that's, you know, it feels like archaic when I'm reading Anna Smith Sparks series. That is that brutal, archaic kind of sense, a little bit like Cormac McCarthy at times. But yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. Conan is fantastic. I mean, this is all short stories. It's not written in chronological order. If you've read any of the comics, then you will see familiar short stories here. If you've watched the films, you'll see a few nods here and there. But yeah, so Robert E. Howard said he was writing Conan as if he was sitting down in a pub talking with the great Cimmerian about his days of past, and they're not in chronological order, so he was just kind of telling story by story about different things. And you know, they're full of sword and sorcery, magic, and lots of blood and gore, and just Conan is one of the most iconic characters ever. So yeah, I'll definitely check this out.
Everything you're looking for in a read.
Absolutely.
So my first one I'm going to be talking about is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. So I've pilfered this really nice... Ed's just dropped all of his books by accident. That was a very sad moment. Ed has made amends for his crime and fixed the problem. He is
sorry, Robert.
There was no eternal damage to the book, so it's okay. Everyone can calm down.
Just to myself.
Okay. So I was talking about A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. So I pilfered this copy from Papa Gwynne. Very lovely... illustrated edition, which was great to read from. So this is, I think it's labelled as a children's novel. It's more like on a late teens. He is that kind of writer, but it's one of those, a bit like Neil Gaiman, who whilst like the Graveyard Book is for that age, it's also
appeals to adults
applicable.
as well.
It appeals to adults,
like Shrek.
Exactly, like Shrek. And A Monster Calls, it's very hard hitting and emotional read. So it's about a boy he's quite young, I think 12, 13, and his mother has cancer, and it's about him understanding what is going on, about his everything he goes through, the different stages. So he at times there's like denial, anger, all these things going on, and some nights he has a nightmare where he sees this tree come towards him, and in the film, as narrated, the tree's voice is Liam Neeson, and this monster, as he sees it, tells him some stories of old, saying that he was there a millennium ago, and they're like folk tales, and they've got like didactic messages, and they're brilliantly executed. And A Monster Calls, it's got such an emotional core to it. It's really compelling. It is really hard hitting, as I said, and you've definitely got to be in a certain frame of mind when you read this. But just like many of the best books out there, it is so emotional. And it's amazing for it. The way that it's done in an incredible way. Patrick Ness doesn't force anything. It comes so naturally. And yeah, I just think it's really a masterpiece. It was one of my favourite reads of last year. And yeah, it's just brilliant. I'm not doing it justice.
And the next one for me is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. Wow, this is blown up in the fantasy world, I think, through Mark Lawrence's SBFBO competition, which is fantastic, looking at
I didn't notice that.
indie publications, self-published fantasy. And The Sword of Kaigen is a standalone fantasy inspired by Japanese mythology and history and culture, mixed with a little bit of kind of modern, I don't know, apocalyptic feeling, I'm not too sure. But there's definitely some modern things in here, like technology and whatnot. But yeah, it's got a funny vibe to it at the beginning, but I was always put off of reading this because it has video games in, like, the first 2 chapters or something. And they also walk around with katanas, and I was like, they don't go together. I just couldn't,
a bit jarring.
Couldn't get to grips with it. But I pushed through that, and I forced myself to grow up a little bit.
Be open-minded.
Literature can include these things and still be great. And I was blown away. I've got to say, M.L. Wang's strong suit here is writing characters and action. The plot is, it's pretty standard, but it's a lot of fun. But the characters, it's like she's taken a deep dive into 2 characters. One is a mother and one is her son. And it is fantastic. And, to see how historically the culture has influenced her writing is fascinating, with the family's hierarchy of, men at the top and women, finding their place in society. And then this takes me to the POV Misaki, which is just, she's the mother, and she reminds me of Orca. She obviously has a past which is unspoken of for multiple reasons, which you'll find out when you read this. And she is a superb character. The book really takes some twists and turns, and you are left shocked. I think the end was dragged out a little bit. It probably should have finished a little bit quicker, but for me, this is a 5-star read, and this is the whole reason why I love fantasy, and why I think lots more fantasy should be standalone, because you can have an amazing story wrapped up in this. I think it's about 500 pages or so, 600 pages, and it reads just like a thunderstorm.
Very nicely said. It's one of those that now, whenever I finish a book, it's like, what are you reading next? As with one hand, he's pushing the Sword of Kaigen interview.
Yeah. I just know that you will love it. If you like Rage of Dragons, check it out.
Wow. Well, it's going to be on my list. Next up, I don't have a physical copy next to me, so I'm just going to say I listened to it in an audiobook format, narrated by Derek Perkins, I believe. I looked at it before.
What is it? You haven't told us.
I should probably mention the book.
I'm holding it.
Of Blood and Fire. There we go. Ed is holding it. By the awesome Ryan Cahill. So this is a self-published novel, the first of a series. The Bound and the Broken, I believe it's called, and it's narrated, as I said, by Derek Perkins. Me and Ed were scrolling through a few books, and we were like, what should we listen to? And then Derek Perkins had this awesome voice, so we were like, we have to listen to this. You've not got to it yet.
Jeremy Irons, if he met.
Who else?
Ooh, who's got a gravelly voice?
That will be another video.
Macquin.
Liam Neeson or something.
Yeah. What's with Liam Neeson today?
I don't know. He's just in my head. So where was I? Yes, Of Blood and Fire. So it's a very traditional fantasy take, but with a really fresh spin. He said himself his 3 favourite authors are Gemmell, Gwynne, and Tolkien. So yes, it feels a bit surreal with that. Our father has inspired someone to write their own book, isn't it?
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is awesome.
I think we take it for granted sometimes.
We do. Sometimes just like, we just see these. It's just Papa Gwynne's books.
I see him eating cereal with Cheerios in his beard, and then we look online and there's people saying he's amazing, and we're like, hang on. He is pretty cool, isn't he? Yeah.
We love his works, but then we're like, oh my, this is awesome. And so it's really cool that Ryan Cahill has been inspired by him. And Of Blood and Fire, I definitely see the similarities there, in the sense of Corban before everything goes wrong. But yeah, it's a bit like that, that kind of traditional fantasy vibe. And I really loved it. It's got a lot of those older creatures and monsters and dragons, which we don't actually see as much in modern fantasy. I think they're kind of dying out, but that and also the Black-Tongued Thief.
They're back and bigger than ever.
Yeah, that and the Black-Tongued Thief, and obviously Shadow of the Gods are showing that you can take elements of those older tropes and creatures and worlds, and you can bring them in a fresh setting, and Blood and Fire was just a perfect example of that. So yeah, that was
very nice, Will.
my seconds.
The next one for me
Book
is
of this video.
a fiction, sorry, and this is by Sally Rooney. This is Beautiful World, Where Are You? And if you've watched the channel before, you know that kind of we watched Normal People, the series, and we really enjoyed it. Well, we loved that, didn't we? And since then, we've kind of discovered Sally Rooney's writing, and it's fantastic. It's really wonderful.
Actually,
to read.
I did discover it before.
Oh,
I was the original in this household.
I read it before it was a TV show, before she had her deal.
Not quite, actually.
No, but
I'm not quite that original.
Oh, but still, you have been pushing me to read a bit more stuff like this. Sally Rooney is an Irish writer. All of her characters are from Ireland, and they always well, mostly anyway, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they're always in Ireland.
The majority.
And sometimes they're students, sometimes they're up and coming writers. But she just has this way of her writing about her interactions between characters, between people, that feel so real and awkward, and things are left unsaid that you're just like, why are you not saying this? But then really it's just seeping in realism.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much realism where I'm like, great. But other times it's you just realise how, you know, it's like, it feels like anyone could write it, but then when you read it, only Sally Rooney could.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And I mean, the characters are so relatable at times, even though you wish they weren't relatable. And they make weird decisions and you know, complete left turns. But it really is just about people just finding their way and finding other people to socialise with, to love, to fight with, to argue with, and to enjoy each other's company. And it's, you know, it's a riveting read. There is no denying it.
Yeah, I think Sally Rooney, she is one of the greatest at exploring human flaws to the full extent, but still making you root for the characters. So she's showing the worst of their personality, but showing that they are good as well. And she's just incredible at that. And I talked about this a few videos ago, and yeah, we both just loved it.
A great lady.
Brilliant. And I'm going to read everything she writes. We've both read all 3 of her books. Have you not read Normal?
That is a dig, isn't it?
I promise
I haven't read Normal People.
Oh my goodness.
Have you got all 3 in hardback though?
Oh, sorry, I'm a student and you're a teacher. But next up, I have The Empty Throne by Bernard Cornwell. It's got this nasty sticker on. I tried to take it off, but it started leaving those marks below. So I'm going to have to get a specific tool to get rid of that. But The Empty Throne is the 8th instalment in the Saxon Stories The Last Kingdom. However, you know it as it's the series that has been adapted on Netflix as The Last Kingdom. And it's written by Bernard Cornwell, a hugely successful series where we follow...
Yeah, if you haven't heard of it, you've probably been living under a rock for the last few years.
No offence. This is about Uhtred of Bebbanburg, son of Uhtred, son of Uhtred, son of Uhtred. And it is awesome. I think the few instalments before this, they had been following a bit of a formula, and I was a bit like, okay, it's getting a bit repetitive. Oh, nice little squeak there. As Chaz, he's swivelling around. They were getting a bit too formulaic, a bit repetitive. I think if I read them a year apart, like many people did as they were released, like Papa Gwynne, you will adore them, but when they're read together, they can be a bit too much. But then I read this one, and I was like, this is awesome. This is so individual.
Original, isn't it? Yeah.
This is one where a heavy role is Uhtred's relationship with his children. It's the first one that really focuses on that, and it was just awesome. I really loved that change of focus, because Uhtred, he's aging a bit, so it's really got a very different dynamic. He's not as much of the warrior just chucking himself into everything. He's got to be a bit smarter, because he is slowing down, and he's got his children now who are also...
He is grey for a reason.
Yeah, and
there's some deep cunning.
Exactly. He's old for a reason. But yes, this is really great return to form in this series, and yeah, it just made me fall in love with it all over again.
And the ending is superb. Like, it will leave you laughing.
Yeah.
Right, the last one for me, talking of the Viking culture, the Dark Ages, the early medieval period. Here I have Mediterra by William R. Short. And William R. Short is the founder of the Herstwick Viking group in North America. And they do a lot of experimental archaeology about the way that they use weapons and the way that they fight and the way that weapons have been kind of thought of, and looking at kind of, if you find a Viking sword that was buried, really look at the measurements of it and think, what does that actually tell us? Like lots of people have found that Viking swords had very short hilts, because you see lots of things in TV nowadays and the swords have got really big hilts, but really they use them in a very specific way. They grip their swords in a very specific way that meant that they needed short pommels and short hilts as well, so the pommel would sit in their hand. But anyway, those kind of details are in here. This takes lots of it kind of breaks down all the Viking weapons and all the ways of combat they would have fought, and it has links to archaeology, experimental archaeology, and literary sources such as the sagas. So it might talk about, if you watch The Northman, how if you've seen in the trailer, Alexander Skarsgård catches a spear, that will happen in the sagas, and they mention that in there. What saga it's from, I can't remember off the top of my head. But that kind of stuff, and they try out these moves and try out these different things, fighting, maybe with two axes, say axe and an axe, and they let you know what they think of it, and then it tells you what stuff was made out of. It's just, if you're really geeky about, swords and weapons and Viking culture and combat and all that kind of stuff, I mean, this is the book for you. Great title as well, lovely looking sword there, and yeah, that's all I can say really.
Very nice.
It's a great fun read.
And you've almost read every single book on Viking archaeology, Norse archaeology.
Wow.
Recently, haven't you?
Maybe.
And
But still
now,
more on my list.
Still more. There's always more. The last one for me today is The Hand of the Sun King by J.T. Greathouse. This was released July or August last year, but I didn't get around to it until the very end of the year, and it was so awesome. So we have a character who, his father is a merchant in basically what is, it's very different culture, but I guess you get it if I'm going to use this kind of example. Imagine it's the Roman Empire and they're expanding everywhere, but his mother and his grandmother, who also live with him, are part of, like, say, a Celtic tribe, but their religion is now outlawed. But he is raised in all those beliefs as well as his father's, and it's that clash of cultures which really makes the most interesting part of this story, and how, whilst he's going through the roots of the Roman, it's not Roman, but I'm just going to carry on using that kind of school and education and all the different classes and roots for his life, through that way he's still heavily linked in this other life, this other belief, and whilst it's going on this constant conflict from, like, rebellion in different countries around the world, all against this expanding empire. And there's a great use of magic in this, where basically there's an emperor who's a bit like a god, he's mean, and basically he's trying to add different types of magic to his own powers, which you do by learning the secrets, which is I'm really not explaining it well, but trust me, please, it is really interesting, very fresh take on magic, where you're not told about every single bit of it, but it's enough that it really is interesting, and I can tell that it could be explored a lot more in the sequel. This is the first of a series, and I just really loved it. Really fresh fantasy, which I think at that point I was a bit like, okay, things are getting a bit similar now, there's awesome bits, but then this just jumped out of nowhere, took me by surprise, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, when you read this, Bill, you were harking on about it quite a lot. Very similar to when you first read The Rage of Dragons, so I'll have to get round to this one soon.
I think this, The Rage of Dragons and We Are the Dead, are three that have really had, like, a huge effect on me. Like, it's when I was having a bit of a reading slump, not overall, but just with fantasy, and then they revived it. And yeah, this is the latest in that collection.
Very nice. Right, thank you very much, everyone, for watching our video about some of our new favourites. There will be, I'm sure, another video out there pretty soon about some new favourites and talking about lots more books. But have you read any of these books? Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of them? Have you got any new recent favourites that we should be putting at the top of our mountains of TBR?
Yes, so we have a Patreon if you want to support us there. We also have, well, we have accounts on different social media outlets if you want to follow them, see what's going on, have a chat with us about books, and yeah, subscribe to us if you're enjoying the content. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this intrigued you in a few, and hopefully you've read some as well, so you can put some of your thoughts in the comments below. But for now, truth and courage, the Brothers Gwynne.
Truth and courage, stay safe from the Brothers Gwynne.